Well, good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. Good to see you here. I'm going to start off with some opening remarks. I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming legislative session. Want to talk about the information my office put out today around next steps on K-12 schools. Brief update on the One Oregon tour and a little bit brief on the Portland Central City Task Force. So as you know, there is a legislative session coming up, and we have been working hard to stay focused on the priorities for the state in our requests and our plans for the session, chatting with legislative leaders about how we have a successful session. So for me, as we've looked at the budget that came out of this year's session and what the agencies need and what we're hearing are top priorities, there are several priorities for me going into session. No surprise, we're going to stay focused on housing production in particular, and also meeting the needs of Oregonians who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We have some ongoing asks there as well. We're going to continue to stay focused on our youngest learners, making sure that some of the early literacy resources that were approved by the legislature do get released, talking about the needs in early intervention and employment-related daycare, and issues around summer learning, and I will specifically talk to that in a moment. Like legislators, we will be focused on public safety. We are particularly working to collaborate with legislators who are on the Joint Committee on Addiction and Community Safety Response. That joint committee, we fully anticipate will have not only some policy recommendations, but probably some budget recommendations as well. We want to be supportive of that. We are trying to stay in close contact with what legislators are working on there, and we will continue to work with them on public safety issues. And then just broadly, it's really important to make sure our agencies have what they need to function. There's always a bit of adjustment when we come into session, focusing on customer service and governance and the things that make sure state government is meeting the needs of Oregonians. So there'll be a lot of small things in the session, not surprising. And for me, it's making sure our agencies can do their work in the coming year. So in terms of actual numbers, when it comes to housing and housing production, the number one priority for me will be a housing production bill in the 2024 session. It's not the only ask around housing, but it'll be my priority bill. Attached to that bill, you will see $500 million for housing production for a variety of things, anywhere from technical assistance to local communities, to financing for infrastructure, financing for development. I am really urging legislators to be bold with one-time money to make sure we can move forward on our housing production goals here in the state. In addition to that, we have been communicating with local communities about what they need to continue to serve folks who are experiencing homelessness right now. We will have additional asks for shelter operations to make sure we don't lose any existing capacity between now and the end of the biennium. So that will be $65 million. We're also asking for around $33 million for more rent assistance. All told, the housing and homelessness package from my office will be $600 million coming into the legislative session. On the education front, I want to highlight a couple key investments that we're hoping to see. As you know, when I put out my budget earlier this year, we were working hard to make sure we could do more for summer learning to really help our students who are still dealing with academic loss from the pandemic, but also helping them with their social and emotional health by having more programming during the summer. We didn't get that done in the long legislative session. I'll be partnering with legislators next year to come back on summer learning with an ask of $50 million to make sure we can help communities and schools do more for their students this coming summer. There are also going to be some budget deficits we have to address. One, which I think you're a little aware of, is the issue around employment-related daycare, our state's subsidy program for parents who need help with their childcare. There's currently a wait list to meet the needs of the folks who are on the program now for the rest of the biennium. We will need more investment. At least $38 million in general fund, but that's in addition to some other money that's already sitting there. So all told, we need $59 million to maintain the employment-related daycare program through the rest of the biennium. And I mentioned early intervention, the program that works with children who might be having physical or learning disabilities before they enter the K-12 system. We have a $22 million budget deficit there for projected caseload. So all told on the early learning and little kids ask, it's almost $100 million to address those issues in the upcoming session. One other budget item I want to highlight, because I know it's been getting a lot of coverage, is the issue of the ODOT budget. So ODOT leaders over the last several biennium have been trying to manage to meet basic operations and maintenance with their existing budget. And they announced a couple months ago that they would have difficulty meeting their winter maintenance needs. My team went back and reviewed all of that and said, look, we got to do better here. So we do have a $19 million one-time ask to legislative leaders right now to allow ODOT to schedule for more overtime and more equipment that they need to meet the winter maintenance needs this coming winter and the next winter in the biennium. We are waiting to hear from legislative leaders if we can get the go-ahead to spend that money and that dealt with in session. It's a one-time ask. We really have to look at the 2025 session where there will be a larger transportation funding conversation. But in the meantime, we have to make sure that we can do what we can to make sure our roads are safe. I want to be clear, there are dollars now to do most of the highway maintenance during the winter, but we do have some gaps. We need to address that, and that's the $19 million ask for the legislature. So that's upcoming in the session. Earlier today, switching gears to K-12 education. So me and my team have been very focused in the last few weeks on the teacher strike in Portland. I'm very glad that our students went back to school yesterday in Portland. And that negotiation really reflects some of the statewide concerns and systemic challenges that our districts are facing. This school year, 1 out of every 3 school districts are going to be in labor negotiations. Now, there are a lot of particular instances around why Portland was so difficult. However, I also want to send a signal to those districts to say, we hear you, we know there are challenges, we're going to step up and have a different conversation in the coming year. So when we come into the 2025 legislative session, we can be better prepared to address these larger systemic issues. So in the release today, I will be leading on several steps. One of them is convening a group of leaders to really get focused on an action plan for our students around their social and emotional well-being. We're hearing of disturbances in classrooms. We're hearing about students not coming to school. We are hearing about the challenges that are left over from the pandemic and how it has impacted our young people. So we need to have a plan to strengthen the resources in our schools to help our educators be prepared to work with our students who have needs, as well as support the needs of our students around their social and emotional well-being. So that's the first item. Second item is getting frank with the legislature about where are we on the funding formula that funds our schools. What we heard was current service level didn't do it. We have outstanding needs around wage growth in our schools and related to contracts. So we have to, I think, take a deep dive on how we're doing our school funding formula. So we'll work with the legislature on that, and we'll be asking my chief financial officer and the Department of Education to weigh in with legislators of how to review and revise the methodology on school funding. So when we come into the 2025 session, we will have a better understanding of what the actual needs of the districts are, because we're not there. There's a big disconnect between current service level and what we're seeing at the local level. In addition to that, the legislature did start a task force on statewide educator salaries. We are monitoring that. I think we have to consider whether we need a statewide salary schedule for our educators so we get predictability about what district budgets are going to look like, how the funding from the state comes. We are the largest funder. The state funds, our districts, right? We have to do a better job of understanding what educators need and we need to consider some kind of statewide salary schedule. So we'll be working with legislators on that issue. Last item that I'm committed to is, I think you probably noticed in the Portland strike that we had some confusion about what resources Portland Public Schools had to meet the needs of the contract negotiations. And other states, I believe, do a better job of creating that transparency around resources. So we are going to be going into session asking for resources to create the Office of Transparency within the Oregon Department of Education so we can focus on budget information. Resources districts have, how are they expending those dollars? So the public, teachers, districts, everybody is on the same page. So that is the other commitment I'm making. Briefly, switching gears here, we have 2 counties left on the One Oregon Listening Tour. We'll be reaching those in December, Lane County and Clackamas County, and looking forward to those. And we will have a wrap up in December of the whole listening tour for you to talk about. So we'll get that to you as well. And then we are working hard. We've been very busy on the Portland Central City Task Force. We are on timeline to be able to present the action plans that are coming out of that task force at the Oregon Business Summit on December 11th. So I hope you're going to be there for that reveal. We'll have lots of details there. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Maybe I'll start in the front and I'll just go back. So Peter?
On the education point, you just elaborated on, does one of those bring up the implication of statewide collective bargaining, which hadn't been seriously discussed in the state level as it brought up before, and I believe our neighboring state Washington.
Well, I do know Washington has a salary schedule, and they might also do statewide collective bargaining. Right now, I'm starting with how do we get a better understanding of what the compensation costs are for our schools, particularly for entry-level educators. And I think the legislature is showing wisdom here by saying we have to talk about this because we have lots of districts. Everyone's all over the map on how people are being compensated. We could be at a competitive disadvantage with other states. Even district to district, there's a disconnect. So we're focusing on a compensation schedule. I wouldn't go as far as collective bargaining statewide. I think we need to focus just on the compensation piece. But certainly legislators could take that up. Right now, I want to focus on what the task force on educator salaries is working on.
I have a remote question from Julia Silverman. The Portland School Board has asked the governor to commit to reform of how much funding local districts are allowed to keep from local option levies fueled by property taxes. Is this a priority that you share?
I am aware that some districts, in particular here, Portland Public, does have a local operating levy, and they are constricted how much they can, under state law right now, how much that levy can contribute to the funding at Portland Public. I am supportive if that bill lands on my desk from this upcoming session. I am supportive of that. I think if Portland has that flexibility and needs that flexibility, it will help students in what is a very high priced part of the state, and I think that's driving some of the need there. So, yeah.
You said that you expect 1 in 3 districts around the state to go through bargaining at some point this week or this year. We've got Bendel Pine Schools in its negotiations right now, very similar to Portland. Your office was very involved in the PPS strike. Do you see your office getting involved in other negotiations?
Well, I hope no district goes through a strike. We've been through a lot with Portland. I think the number one issue for, and I'm seeing good communication in Bendel Pine as well as, Salem Kaiser is also, I believe, heading into mediation or in mediation. It's about establishing that trust between the administrators and the educators. They all want the same thing. I think some of the breakdown in Portland was a severe lack of trust between the union and the administration. So I'm hopeful that districts who are in the middle of negotiations and potentially mediation stay the course, hear each other, try to figure it out. What we're going to try to do is make sure that they need information, they'll have it. That's why this Office of Transparency is really important. Now, that's not going to solve the issue for the upcoming school year, but I think going forward, we won't have some of the issues we had in Portland if we have a place where people can go and see what the resources actually are. I really appreciate our district leaders and our teachers who are working really hard right now to get to contract agreements across the state. And because it has been hard, we have to come into the 2025 legislative session with a clear plan of what things cost. And we are going to have a conversation once we know what those things cost, how we're going to pay for it.
I have a remote question from Dirk Vanderhart at OPB. In the past, the governor relied on current service levels offered by state budget officials to determine appropriate school funding. Do you no longer think that that is an appropriate measure?
I think our current service level formula, that is the way we figure out how much money districts need, is updated, reviewed, might need to be modernized. We might be in a different situation. Again, it is complicated when you have 198 school districts who compensate differently. And so it's hard to establish current service level. We have to look at the formula, and we have to look at potentially going with some kind of statewide salary schedule to make that clearer and more predictable in the future.
65 million for ongoing shelter operations. That's a first-time fund, and I imagine it's the result of the needs assessment that's getting ready to be published by Oregon Housing Community Services right now. You know, that needs assessment was announced just shortly after my coverage on closing shelters in Oregon. It does kind of beg the question, was this on your radar before that coverage, or did the coverage sort of leak that assessment?
I think we are continuing. Well, first of all, thank you for continuing to stay on the topic. This is really important. I think one of the things that we have not had in the state is an intentional system of shelters where the state has a role in funding. And what we have been trying to figure out is, what do local communities need? How are they funding them now? The money that was received in the pandemic stood up a lot of shelters. How do we maintain those shelters? How do we stay committed to the new shelter capacity we have been promoting through the emergency order? So by the end of this biennium, hopefully with the 65 million that we're asking for in the upcoming session, that we will, by the end of the biennium, really understand what the state's commitment is, what the number of shelters are, how do we maintain that, so we can have an ongoing system that actually works for communities. It's frankly been pretty ragged. It's been all over the map. We're trying to systematize it. We need 65 million more to get through the biennium to make sure the capacity we need will be there with the state's help. We have been working on this since day one, trying to understand how we stand up new shelter capacity, how we maintain shelter capacity. And I want to thank all the communities who have been responding. This has been hard to figure out, but I think we have a much tighter understanding because everyone's been working hard at it. And that 65 million is how we finish the deal for this biennium. And I hope legislators will support it.
Question, recognizing with the data that we see a couple months, comes out a couple months after those numbers are in, it looks like we're on good, like making good progress to meeting 2 of your 3 goals. About 80% of the way there for the shelters, about 50% for keeping people housed, but not making great progress on getting those 1,200 people housed, like 70% for households better progress in their people. Are we going to meet that 1,200 household goal by January? What have you learned? That's what you learned from
Well, thank you for following the numbers. And I appreciate you noticing that there is a lag time, and we'll try to true that up the closer we get to January so we have a better understanding. So we have real-time data in January, because we are shooting for those goals in January. We're pushing hard. And you're absolutely right. We're on track, if not exceeding our goals around building new shelter capacity. We're doing a really good job about eviction prevention. I think we had systems in place. The rehousing effort has been the hardest one. Some of that relates to our housing crisis. We literally don't have housing in some communities to when people have transitioned and gotten stable to go into housing. It's really hard. I'm having individual conversations with stakeholders to help us out. Folks landlord groups, housing authorities, other folks to say, what can you do more to help us get folks rehoused? I will tell you, I think it's the number that's going to be hard to meet in January. And that is a direct reflection of the lack of housing, affordable housing that's available in communities. But we're going to keep trying, because when someone comes off the streets and has gotten stable in the shelter and the transitional housing that is being provided with services, we need a place for them to go, and we need to support them to stay housed. That's why we're also pushing for longer-term rent assistance, so we can help people stay stable. This is a continuum. It's not one thing or the other. It's the whole thing, so we can meet the needs of the state. I have had preliminary conversations with Mayor Hoy about this very topic. Other states with state capitals have some kind of payment arrangement. I would not be surprised to see a bill in the upcoming session that addresses this. I think the question is how you calculate that and what is an appropriate role. Having state government in Salem is a benefit, and there are also costs to provide public safety services. So I think there is a place for the state to do more to support Salem because of the number of properties we have here. But it will be up to the city of Salem with Salem legislators to bring something into the session on that. If it comes to my desk, yes. Yeah.
Measure 110 questions. For special session to, so wondering if you're still had hands on the.
Thank you for the question. We can also, yes, I did get a letter from the Senate Republicans as well as Independent Senator Brian Boquist. We have written a response to their letter. I'm not calling for a special session. The session is coming up. We're right on top. It's coming very quickly. That's where we're going to find solutions. That's why I'm focusing on the Joint Committee on Addiction and Community Safety. I think that is the place where we're going to come up with the solutions, whether it's banning public use, dealing with some of the issues that law enforcement has and being able to get drugs off the streets. I am open to what comes out of that committee. It's a priority for Oregonians, and we have to understand how we get this system to work better for people and keep our community safe. Yeah.
When it comes to education funding, it's sitting on $5 billion of bills. Why not be bold and take perhaps 2% of that? Say, I want to allocate it for mental health counselors every school across the state. Who will stand up and say that?
Well, first of all, personal income tax kicker is in the Constitution. So now, if legislators want to take up this issue, I'm certainly open to it. I also know that, and I think I mentioned this at the last time we saw each other, there are folks who are really struggling right now financially. That kicker rebate next year is going to be important for those households. I'm not saying we shouldn't have a future conversation, but we have seen the cost of living go up. We have seen inflation level off, but food prices have not gone down. And people need help, and this is one way that they will get some tax relief next year. Longer conversation, up to the legislature, certainly willing to consider it, but right now I think that tax relief is necessary for those folks.
It's not a check, and you're not going to get a big check in the mail if it's better than income tax. A lot of those folks you're talking about, they're not going to see that credit.
A lot of folks are going to see significant tax relief next March, and I think that's important for Oregonians. So, Dick.
Governor, you've had talks with Democratic and Republican legislators. How have those talks gone, and is everybody on the same page so that walkouts, et cetera?
Well, I want to credit the legislative leaders, Senate President, the Speaker, and the two Republican leaders. They have been having meetings over the last couple months, the four of them together, to talk about how the 2024 session can be successful. What I'm hearing is they have been productive talks. They've been talking about structural things that will be important for everyone to feel heard, whether you're in the majority or the minority. And I'm optimistic. I mean, the ball's in their court, but they are taking the relationship between the caucuses and between the chambers very seriously, and I'm optimistic we're going to have a session that is successful. So,
I want to talk about or ask you about another situation you mentioned, moderating, which is the sequence. And I know the cities have followed on the state for future events. I just wanted to get office is thinking help those.
yeah, thank you for the question. In fact, I was just having a conversation this morning with our team to see where we are. We're going to have to collaborate with our federal delegation here because this is the Corps of Engineers that did this drawdown. You know, this dam hasn't had a drawdown like this since 1966, which is the year I was born. They didn't anticipate how much trouble they were going to cause with this significant drawdown. That's not okay. This is significant impact on these local water systems. And right now, we don't have a solution. It is good that we're coming into legislative session. Maybe there are some things we can do. We're going to also need help from our federal partners at the Corps of Engineers to help us pay for some of the impacts of the drawdown. The drawdown for the fish, necessary. How they went about it, not good. So.
Time for one more, gentleman on the end.
District attorneys in several counties have asked you to reconsider commutations. Where does that process stand, and do you intend to change it?
Yeah, thanks for the question. First of all, I want to say thank you to the district attorneys. They already have busy jobs, and we don't have that kind of information. They're the ones who can tell us what's going on in their communities. We are starting to get lists from district attorneys about cases we need to review for possible revoking of commutations. Starting to do that. I am open to that. They're making strong cases why individuals should have their commutations revoked. And we can get you more information. It's an ongoing process, but we are taking all those lists and we are reviewing them and taking them very seriously. And I, one more. Then the $65 million for shelter capacity will address a large number of current shelters. I believe that we will also see an additional ask on top of that from the League of Oregon Cities and from the mayors, because we are comparing lists, their lists, our lists, making sure to see. So I would not be surprised if there's an additional ask. At minimum, I'm starting with $65 million. There could be more. So it will cover some of the ones that are of concern for cities. I don't know if it'll cover all of them. So thanks very much. Really appreciate the time.